What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping in for the final part of Luke Smith's Director's Cut updates. And in this one he talks about the evolving world, how seasons and content are going to be a little bit different in year 3, so we'll touch on that and try and make sense of it, but then he talks about damage stacking changes, adjustments to kind of perks and things that we can use in the game, more changes coming to supers, heavy ammo, and here he talks about PvP. So he does touch on trials, and yes, it is going to remain on hiatus. But then he breaks down a bunch of playlist changes, adjustments to matchmaking, and a bunch of other stuff. So guys, we're going to jump in and break it down in the video, so let's get into it. Now first up, he talks about an evolving world. He says there's an aspirational vision for what evolving could mean for Destiny. Someday, Destiny could become a dynamic world where the world changes each season. We want playing Destiny to feel like you're playing in a game world with true momentum, a universe that is going somewhere, a game where things are happening, not just in terms of new items and activities, but also in terms of narrative. It's frequently seemed like Destiny was treading water in terms of moving the world's narrative forward, and we want to tackle that in Destiny 2's third year. During Season 8, a new situation will unfold on the moon. I'm being cagey here because I'm reluctant to spoil anything, but over the course of the season, parts of the game will change before the situation culminates in an event that will ultimately resolve it, and its content will be exhausted. This resolution sets up the events of Season 9, which again adds something new to the game and resolves it, something that will too go away, but not before setting up Season 10, etc. This differs from last year's annual pass, which permanently added activities to the game, and this year we'll see events that last for 3 months and offer new rewards to chase, although at the end of that period, some of the activities will go away. For a time, the rewards will too, but we also acknowledge that part of playing Destiny is collecting all of the stuff, so in future seasons, the weapons and legendary armor associated with these activities will be added to other reward sites. And so this is very different, really, in terms of the way that Bungie are rolling content out. And it kind of speaks a little bit to their potential kind of vision, especially while meeting the technical requirements of actually running this stuff on consoles, but also having teams produce the content. And essentially Bungie are going to focus on kind of world events happening. And of course that can mean new activities, but as he says, some of those activities and even rewards may go away at the end of the season. I wouldn't anticipate that that will be all of the content we get, obviously. And so that's kind of a loose explanation of how it's going to be different to the current annual pass. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. I would anticipate we're definitely going to get more information about it. Bungie have said that they're going to break down how seasons will change moving into year 3 in the next couple of weeks. In terms of the situation unfolding on the moon, I'm not sure if this is the Shadowkeep story itself, or whether it could be linked to Season of the Undying, because we know there is a Vex link there too. So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts about that. Next though, Luke Smith talks about buffs, debuffs, and stacking rules. And he says we've taken all of the weapon damage buffs, these enhance the player's outgoing damage, so these are all the ones that can appear on the character, and they've stack ranked their damage effects, so things like Empowering Rift, Well of Radiance, Lumina's buff, and Weapons of Light, which we're going to see in Shadowkeep. It says that they've overhauled the system under the hood, so the damage calculations use only the most powerful buff on a player at a given time. It's got nuance to it, though if you're under the damage effect of something stronger than Well of Radiance, you will still receive the healing effect of the Well, but the damage bonus would come from the other buff, so, Lumina or Weapons of Light for example. And so they are really kind of fundamentally adjusting the rule set for some of these stacking bonuses. And of course that will potentially mean that Bungie have to curate less individual sandbox elements, as they roll them out into the game, because this new rule system will solve a bunch of those problems. He does say that they've made some changes to debuffs as well, and of course that is an effect that weakens the enemy, so they've touched the effects and durations of a number of them, and they include Hammer Strike, Shadowing Strike, Tractor Cannon, and Shadow Shot. But Shadow Shot will now work on powerful weapons as well. In general, only one ability buff will be active on a player at a given time, and the enemies can be affected by only one debuff at a time. There are notable exceptions in the form of exotics and weapon amplification perks like Kill Clip, Rampage, and the exotics and weapon amplification perks will remain multiplicative increases to damage above the ability buff values. And so essentially less of this stuff can kind of be stacked together and working all at the same time. But do remember we are getting additional power potentially in the form of the new artifacts, and they will have buffs and debuffs of their own, so the sandbox is certainly getting more complicated. Now though, he talks about supers, and he says for a pretty decent player running super mods, the time it takes to gain a super is under 2 minutes in PvP. If you compare the duration and damage of roaming supers in Destiny 2 to supers in D1, you'll see that they're more powerful now than ever before. Destiny 2 was overly restrictive at launch, but now the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction, and we'll start to bring this back towards center in Shadowkeep. So generally the power of supers, but also how quickly you can actually accrue them, how quickly you get super energy back, these are all things that are likely to be adjusted going into Shadowkeep. They are making adjustments to heavy ammo, and especially in PvP, Luke says that heavy ammo will be communal in 6v6 playlists. We're also reducing the amount of ammo per brick in PvP for certain 6v6 archetypes. It's not exactly the same as D1 though. When a player cracks open the heavy crate, other players have a window of time to interact with it to get their heavy ammo. So when a heavy box is pulled, it's now going to pull essentially for all players, or all players that are in close enough proximity or can grab it, within the time limit. Essentially, that means that heavy ammo won't always be grabbed by just one person anymore, but of course Bungie are going to be making other adjustments to how much heavy players will actually get. So it's definitely going to be different, maybe a little bit of a fairer system, a less kind of randomized system potentially, but I'd definitely be curious to hear your thoughts on it. Here though, he talks specifically about PvP. He says on the one hand, we have continued to tune the game each quarter, added pinnacle PvP weapons, tried out a ranking system in the Crucible, and returned the game to its 6v6 roots. On the other hand, we haven't released a new permanent game mode. Many game modes from Destiny 1 are nowhere to be seen, there isn't a public-facing PvP team, and the last real thing that was said was that Trials is staying on hiatus indefinitely. And so he says, let's get some of this sorted out. Trials of the Nine wasn't the hero we wanted it to be. We made too many changes to the formula that while it had begun to decline in Destiny 1, it wasn't as flawed as we thought. When we were making Destiny 2, we talked a lot about making sure it felt like a sequel, bringing in new players, and simplifying the game. And Trials of the Nine created another casualty there. It happened on my watch, and if I could turn back time, I'd challenge us to do many things differently, and if nothing else, I hope it's clear that we're committed to learning from the mistakes we make and making it right. There were some really cool parts to the Emissary, some of the gear was pretty potent, but the theme felt weaker, the Trials card was less important, and the stakes felt lower. Trials didn't work the way we hoped, and Trials of the Nine is on hiatus indefinitely. So it isn't coming back, in September, and there isn't currently a plan to bring Trials specifically back into the game, but it does say that they're making revisions to PvP playlists. So they've removed the quick play and competitive nodes from the director. If you're looking for an experience like quick play, they've added Classic Mix, which is a connection-based playlist, which includes Control, Clash, and Supremacy. Competitive is replaced by 3v3 Survival, which now awards glory. We've also added a Survival solo queue playlist that also awards glory, and added a 6v6 Control mode as its own playlist. And he says that with the potential influx of new players this fall, we want to have a playlist that signals to new players that this is where to start. We feel like 6v6 Control is the right starting place when introducing new friends to Destiny. On top of this, they've added a weekly 6v6 rotator and a weekly 4v4 rotator, and these playlists are where modes like Clash, Supremacy, Mayhem, Lockdown, and Countdown will appear. On top of this, they have removed some underperforming maps from matchmaking as well. And so that's kind of just a list of playlist changes, but when you dig in, they're pretty significant. The basic kind of quick play playlist is now going to be called Classic Mix, and it's got Control, Clash, and Supremacy, but competitive is essentially going away or being replaced with 3v3 Survival. And that Survival mode also has a solo queue version of it that can award glory, so basically in the new equivalent of competitive in Destiny, if you're a solo player, you can queue into a solo comp playlist and make that progress. But otherwise, we are going to be looking at a 3v3 mode here. It's interesting that they're keeping the 6v6 and 4v4 rotators on at the same time, but personally I think this definitely sounds like a good mix-up for the game, and 3v3 Survival should be a reasonably good kind of competitive mode to have, but I'll be curious to hear your thoughts about it. He says that they've been working on 4 additional variants of 3v3 Elimination, and they include different approaches to revives, so token resurrection or not, and variations on how heavy ammo works. Elimination will return in Crucible Labs, however, Elimination is very much unfinished. It's missing voiceovers, there are no unique medals associated with it, and between the polish and 4 variants we'd like your feedback on, Elimination for the time being is a great fit for Crucible Labs, and we fully expect it to graduate out of the labs to find a warmer home. He says that they wanted to make sure they could test Elimination on some familiar maps, so they're bringing back Widow's Court and Twilight Gap, and so I'm not sure if those maps will roll out to other Crucible modes, but they're definitely going to be there for these 3v3 modes inside of the labs, so it sounds like a starting point for making some changes to the game. Of course, we don't know how kind of competitive and some of the rewards there are actually going to work. We also don't know what Bungie are revealing as part of this PvP reveal, right? Because that is still something that's coming up in a couple of weeks' time. And so Luke obviously isn't spoiling that, but he's given us the details on how the rest of Crucible's quality of life is really going to adapt. He says that with matchmaking in PvP, they have made some adjustments to separate very experienced current players and players who are coming in as part of New Light. And so they're looking at that and potentially some other matchmaking adjustments, but he finishes by saying, we think variety across an evening of PvP is important, and this fall, Skill Match should ensure a wider variety of matches, regardless of player skill. Some matches should be tense and thrilling, while other matches should be stomps, and this philosophy should also apply to top players, so that they don't feel that every match is a sweat show either. He says that they're refactoring how players earn glory ranks with these new skill match changes. We're factoring in your skill value to glory gains and losses so that that number can more effectively represent skill. On top of this, they are making changes to glory, valor, and infamy to make losses less punishing on streaks than they currently are. And so guys, that's a lot to talk about right now. Of course, I think in this episode in particular, we've got a lot of quality of life conversation. I think what they're doing with the sandbox, is hopefully going to make sense to players once they get their hands on 2.0 and the new artifact system and power in the game. As far as base changes for PvP, I'm very excited about what we've seen here. Luke is definitely talking about quality of life and some of the stuff that they want to do outside of whatever this kind of reveal is going to be in a couple of weeks' time. So do bear in mind that there could be a substantial piece of content that's going to kind of go into PvP. It's also going to be pretty huge when Bungie talk about the changes to seasonal content, events and content that may go away at the end of a season. But of course, with some of the technical restrictions Bungie have spoken about, this could actually be a way that they can continue to support the game because the game just doesn't bloat up and bloat up and bloat up. At a certain point, things will be taken away. And that might sound a little bit scary to players as well because it's a very different system. And so I'm going to take a little bit of time to get my head around it, but also I think we need Bungie to show us more of how it's actually going to work. And once again, PvP and seasonal content changes, all of that stuff we still have reveals for in the next couple of weeks' time. So guys, let us know your thoughts about it down below, but if you've enjoyed the video, a rating is very much appreciated. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit subscribe to see a lot more D2 content. But for now, thank you as always for tuning in, and I will catch you guys very soon.